Felicity was afraid she would not die. She was enslaved. She was pregnant. She was locked in a prison in Carthage in the year 203. Her companion was a young Roman mother named Perpetua, nursing an infant son. Both women were waiting to face the beasts. Felicity was not afraid of dying. She was afraid of being left behind. Roman practice was understood to delay execution of pregnant women. If the child inside her came too late, she would not enter the arena with the others. She would not die with the martyr company that had confessed Christ beside her. Beyond the prison walls, Carthage was Rome's great North African capital. The small group waiting inside were catechumens, still being formed for baptism when the arrest came. 6 names remembered together: Perpetua, Felicity, Revocatus, Saturninus, Secundulus, and Satyrus, who joined them as a companion in witness. Outside the prison, the city was preparing games for the birthday of Geta Caesar. Inside the cell, the pressure came smaller and closer. Perpetua's father was already begging her to live. Her infant was already being brought to her breast. Felicity's labor was near. And a Roman official would soon ask them one question: would they sacrifice? That question drove martyrdoms across the empire. But this story turns on a harder one. When family, empire, status, suffering, and public shame all try to name a Christian, who gets the final word? A note on the source before we go further. The Passion of Perpetua and Felicity is not a modern transcript. It is not a private diary copied without a trace of shaping. It reaches us as a composite text, an editorial frame, prison material attributed to Perpetua, a vision section from Satyrus, and a final account of the arena. But inside that shaped text, one of the earliest surviving Christian women's voices still speaks from a prison in Carthage. That city was urban, wealthy, and legally ordered. Its religion was public. In Carthage's squares, sacrifice was not private. It was visible. Your neighbors saw it. The officials recorded it. Roman religion was woven into public loyalty. Sacrifice was not merely an opinion about the gods. It was a visible act, a public signal that a person belonged to the order Rome claimed to guard. For Christians, that visible act crossed a line. The Passion does not hand us a clean legal file. It does not preserve the exact statute or the exact first trigger for the arrest. Older histories often point to a Severan anti-conversion policy, but the evidence is too debated to make that the foundation of the episode. What the source does give us is more concrete. Christians were pressed towards sacrificial conformity. A Roman official would demand compliance. The prisoners would confess Christ, and that confession would move them from custody toward public death. But before the hearing, before the beasts, before the arena, the story tightens around smaller rooms. A household, a prison, a father standing before his daughter, a mother separated from her child, an enslaved pregnant woman waiting to see whether her body will keep her from dying with the rest. This is where Perpetua and Felicity becomes different from a simple martyrdom formula. The empire's demand enters the home. That word, catechumen, matters. They are not presented as casual sympathizers. They are people being formed for baptism, learning the faith, moving toward full Christian belonging. Their confession is not a sudden private opinion. It belongs to a community, a teaching, a worshipping body, a way of life already taking hold. Perpetua reports that in those same days they were baptized. The timing gives the prison its spiritual weight. Arrest does not stop their Christian formation. It intensifies it. Then the conditions worsen. The text remembers prison as bodily pressure, heat, crowding, fear, and the anguish of a nursing mother. Perpetua is not a marble statue of courage. She is a young woman in confinement, with an infant who needs her body to live. For a time, the child is brought to her. The prison becomes bearable because the child is there. That detail keeps the story honest. Martyr courage here is not the absence of love. It is not indifference to family. The child matters, the milk matters, the separation matters. And because those things matter, Perpetua's confession costs more than a public sentence. It costs her where a mother is most vulnerable. Perpetua's father enters the story again and again. He pleads, he begs her to turn back. He tries to move her through pity, family honor, old age, her mother's grief, her brother's, and the future of her son. He should not be treated as a cartoon villain. The Passion presents him as pressure, but tragic pressure. He is a father trying to keep his daughter alive. He sees what Roman power can do. He sees the shame that could fall on the household. He sees an infant who may lose his mother. And he cannot make Perpetua surrender the name she has received. In one of the text's most memorable exchanges, Perpetua points to a vessel on the ground and asks whether it can be called by any name other than what it is. Then she says the words the Church would remember for centuries. "Neither can I call myself anything else than what I am, a Christian." That is the heart of the episode. Her father has one claim on her. Rome will soon have another. Her social world has another. Her body, her child, and her fear all speak with real force. But Perpetua's answer is about naming. She is not saying that family does not matter. She is not saying that grief is unreal. She is saying that none of those claims can finally rename her. The conflict is painful because her father loves her enough to keep trying, and each time he tries, the Passion asks us to feel both sides at once. A father desperate for his daughter to live, a daughter who believes living by denial would no longer be life. That private agony leads to a public test. The prisoners are brought before Hilarianus, the Roman official hearing the case. This is the familiar pressure point in many martyr stories. Sacrifice, comply, return to order, live. But the hearing should stay sharp and brief here, because the Passion has already shown us what the confession costs. Rome is not only confronting isolated defendants, it is pulling family, motherhood, enslavement, and Christian formation into the public square. Hilarianus urges sacrifice for the well-being of the emperors. Perpetua's father appears again, this time carrying her infant son. The pressure is almost unbearable. Pity your father's grey hairs, pity your baby, sacrifice. Then comes the question, are you a Christian? Perpetua answers, I am a Christian. The words are short enough to miss if the story around them were not so heavy. By now the name has passed through the household. It has passed through prison. It has passed through a father's grief and a child's need. Now it stands before Roman authority. The sentence follows. They are condemned to the beasts. That sentence changes the shape of the story. A hearing becomes a spectacle. Private suffering will become public display. Rome will try to make their bodies teach a lesson to the crowd. But before the arena, the passion takes us deeper into the prisoner's inner world. Between the sentence and the arena, the passion does not show us prisoners waiting in fear. It shows us visions. They are not decorative. They are how the text interprets what is happening, not from the outside, but from inside the prison. The vision material still has to be handled carefully. We should not pretend the camera can verify these scenes from the outside. The text presents them as reported visions, and that is how we should name them. But they show how the Passion understands suffering from inside the prison. Perpetua reports a vision of a bronze ladder reaching upward, narrow, dangerous, guarded by a dragon. She steps on the dragon's head and climbs. At the top, the vision opens into a place of welcome and nourishment. The meaning is not subtle. The path to life passes through danger. The prison is not only a Roman holding place, it is the threshold of spiritual combat. Later, Perpetua reports visions involving Dinocrates, her deceased younger brother. The story links his relief to her prayer. Later Christians would read that scene in different theological ways, and it should not be pressed into a doctrinal argument. In the Passion itself, it is a reported vision about suffering, intercession, and mercy. Then comes another vision of combat. Perpetua is no longer simply a prisoner waiting for the beasts. The arena is reimagined as spiritual contest. Satyrus offers his own vision section, a heavenly scene of vindication and welcome. These visions do not remove the pain from the story. They interpret it. They teach the audience how the martyrs understood the pressure closing around them. Rome saw criminals and spectacle. The Passion saw testing, ascent, mercy, combat, and witness. And that spiritual world does not erase Felicity's suffering. It prepares us to see it. Felicity must not disappear into Perpetua's voice. The Passion presents her as enslaved, pregnant, and imprisoned with the others. She is not an illustration. She is a co-witness. Her crisis is different from Perpetua's. Perpetua fears for her child and faces her father's grief. Felicity faces the possibility that her pregnancy will separate her from the martyr company. Roman practice was understood to delay the execution of pregnant women. The narrative pressure is clear, even if the exact legal reconstruction stays modest. If Felicity gives birth too late, she may not die with the others. That is a strange and terrible fear to modern ears, but inside the Passion, it shows how strongly the martyr company understands witness as communal. Felicity does not want to be spared from pain by being separated from the body of believers with whom she has confessed Christ. Then labor begins in prison. The scene is hard because the source is embodied. It does not let us float above pain. Felicity suffers in custody in the last days before the games. When one of the jailers mocks her, asking how she will bear the beasts if she cannot bear this, she answers with one of the strongest lines in the whole text. "Now it is I that suffer what I suffer, but then there will be another in me who will suffer for me, because I also am about to suffer for him." That is not a denial of the body. That is courage spoken through the body. She gives birth to a daughter. The child is taken in by another Christian woman, and Felicity remains with the company. Now the story has joined two mothers in one witness. Perpetua, separated from her infant son. Felicity, giving birth in prison before death. The empire tried to name them by status: respectable woman, enslaved woman, condemned woman, spectacle body. The Passion remembers them together. The public deaths are linked in the text to games honouring the birthday of Geta Caesar, son of Septimius Severus. That does not mean Geta personally ordered the executions. It means the deaths are folded into imperial spectacle. Punishment becomes public theatre. Bodies become part of a civic lesson. The arena is not just a location, it is Rome's stage for shame. The Passion remembers the martyrs entering with a strange kind of freedom. The narrative presents them as joyful, steady, already interpreting the spectacle differently from the crowd. Then the humiliation sharpens. The text stages the men and women differently. Perpetua and Felicity are exposed to the crowd in a way meant to make their bodies part of the argument against them. Rome is trying to make their shame the last word. The account includes animal attack, injury, and the final sword. But the point of this scene is not gore. The power is in the reversal. Rome staged defeat. The Passion remembers witness. One detail catches the eye with almost unbearable restraint. After the attack, Perpetua is described as more mindful of her modesty than of her suffering. That line is not there to make pain pretty. It shows Rome failing to control the meaning of her body. The martyrs encourage one another. Perpetua speaks a final exhortation to the Church. Stand fast in the faith. Love one another, and do not be offended at my sufferings. The sword finishes what the arena began, but the arena does not get the final word. The martyrs die in Carthage, traditionally on March 7, 203. But the story does not vanish into the sand. Someone preserves it. Someone frames it. Someone copies it. Someone reads it aloud in the church. The Passion becomes part of Christian memory, especially in North Africa. By Augustine's day, Perpetua and Felicity were not forgotten figures from an old legal case. Augustine's sermons show later reception, not eyewitness proof, but they do show that these martyrs still preached to the African church generations later. That endurance matters. The church did not keep this story because it was simple. It is not simple. A father begs. A mother loses. An enslaved woman gives birth in prison. A child is handed to others. Visions are reported with deep spiritual confidence. Roman authority demands public compliance. The arena turns bodies into spectacle. The text answers by remembering those bodies as witnesses. Perpetua's voice is extraordinary. Felicity's silence is not emptiness. Her body, her labour, her status, and her courage speak inside the same memory. This episode cannot be only another story of Christians refusing sacrifice. The deeper question is naming. Perpetua's father tried to name her by family survival. Rome tried to name her by obedience. Felicity's world tried to name her enslaved. The arena tried to name them ashamed. The Passion says they answered with Christ. And that is why the story still presses on the church. Not because every Christian faces the same arena. Not because suffering should be chaste. Not because grief stops hurting when faith is strong. It presses because the pressure to be renamed never disappears completely. Comfort names us. Fear names us. Status names us. Public shame names us. The people we love may name us with tears in their eyes. Perpetua and Felicity do not make that easy. They make it clear. When everything else tried to tell them who they were, their answer was the name they would not surrender.